The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports. You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The good news, they made the NCAA tournament for the third consecutive year. The bad news, they bow out in the first four. And this was a team that started the year ranked in the top 25. They actually started the year ranked in the top 20, and they end up bowing out really before the tournament starts. I know technically the first four is a part of the tournament, but to me, this is a play-in game to be a part of the actual dance. So in my eyes, Texas didn't even make the dance. And to go into the year as one of the top 20 teams in America and to not even qualify for the field of 64, to waste a generational talent with Trey Johnson, who deserves some blame for this season going down the way that it did, and tonight's game going down the way that it did, but to waste a lottery pick who's probably going to dominate at the next level for years to come, that makes this year hurt even more. This was a pretty talented roster, but unfortunately, it just never came together. It was never consistent, and you felt like with what Texas did in Nashville at the SEC tournament last week, beating Vanderbilt, beating A&M in double overtime to get to this spot, you felt like maybe they had turned a corner. And hey, this is as healthy as this team has been all season long. You've got Kendall Weaver back. You've got Arthur Kaluma getting a few extra days to get his body right. Felt like, all right, Texas has a shot, even though the game is close to Xavier, even though Xavier is a solid team. Felt like maybe Texas had found something in that SEC tournament. Maybe they had the pieces to go on a little bit of a run here. And, well, for 25 to 30 minutes of this game tonight, it sure looked like that was the case. But things completely unraveled in the second half. Xavier, way too many three-pointers. They're one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country. That was the one way Texas was going to lose this game, if Xavier knocked down a bunch of threes. And they did. And Texas gave them way too many clean looks from beyond the arc. And again, you credit the Musketeers. They had to make the shots. They made the shots. They shot 55% as a team in the game. They shot 48% from beyond the arc. But this one feels more like Texas just letting a golden opportunity slip away, and they did a lot of that this season. A lot of folks calling for Rodney Terry's job. We'll obviously talk about that because, look, to me, it's felt like Chris Del Conte has been looking for an excuse to make a change, and I think he got his excuse. Again, not a horrible season for Texas, all things considered, but this was an underachieving season for the Longhorns. And when you blow a 13-point lead in the first four game of the NCAA tournament, makes it pretty easy to rip the Band-Aid off and make a move if you want to ultimately make the move. And I think Chris Del Conte now has his excuse to do that with this loss tonight. Also with the fact that Texas is bringing nobody back. So we know Trey Johnson is gone. He's off to the league. Arthur Kaluma, Tremont Mark, Caden Shedrick, Jordan Pope. Some of those guys, I think Longhorn fans are happy that they're leaving. But none of those guys are going to be back next season. So it almost feels like, hey, this could be the time to bring in a new coach, let him rebuild the roster the way he wants to build it, and just make it happen right now. Obviously, time will tell. I don't think this is going to be a tarmac type of situation or a we'll find out tomorrow type of situation, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if a change is coming at the top for Texas basketball. And just a frustrating game. Pulling up my notes here, pulling up the box score here. Just bad defense in the second half. Again, Xavier got way too many clean looks, some bad turnovers by Texas. The Longhorns only had 4 turnovers in the first half. They had more than that in the second half and some costly ones down the stretch. We saw one of those patented scoring droughts for this Texas offense. And these predate Rodney Terry. We saw a lot of this at the end of the Rick Barnes era. We saw this throughout the entirety of the Shaka Smart era. We'd see this with Chris Beard too, where Texas would just pick the most inopportune times to go 3 minutes without a bucket, 5 minutes without a bucket. And Texas, at one point in the second half, while Xavier was mounting their comeback, the The Longhorns missed 11 of 13 shots. That allowed the Musketeers to get back in the game and ultimately take a lead. And for a while, Xavier was punching. They were punching. They cut the deficit to 4 a few different times, but every time they did, it felt like the Longhorns had a response and they punched back. But then Xavier tied the game and the crowd was going nuts. They obviously took a lead with, 4 minutes to go. And down the stretch, again, just a total team collapse by Texas on both ends of the floor. They went cold offensively. Way too much hero ball, way too much ISO ball, the things that we've complained about this program all season long. And again, for the last few years, we saw all of that at the worst possible time. And then defensively, I mean, to let a team shoot 55% from the floor, to let a team make 12 threes in a must-win tournament game, that's unacceptable right there. Unacceptable. So just bad for Texas. Some bad sequences too. Trey Johnson and Xavier went up by 1. The first time they took a lead later in the second half, they go up by 1. Texas gets the ball back. Trey Johnson takes a horrible 3, and then he doesn't get back on defense. Nobody gets back on defense. Like, Trey's going to get blamed because he took the bad shot and it was his man who scored. But like, all 5 Longhorns on that possession are just like standing and watching Xavier get an and one layup on the other end. And yeah, to make matters worse, Trey Johnson just a half-ass shove in the back of the Xavier player who scores. Like, all right, give him 2. Don't give him 3, please. But like that sequence right there is horrible. There was a possession where Arthur Kaluma missed a bunny. Caden Shedrick got an offensive rebound, and then he missed a layup right after that. I think that was a part of the 11 of 13 missed shots that Texas had in the final few minutes here. Just bad. Just bad all the way around. And Trey Johnson, man, you live by the tray, you die by the tray. For most teams, that's the 3 ball. For this team, it's Trey Johnson. He did so many good things tonight, but 4 missed free throws. Did y'all see that? Did I see that right? Trey Johnson missed 4 free throws. That's an 89% free throw shooter. Like, even when he's had bad games during the regular season, and again, tonight wasn't a bad game. He led all scorers with 23, 6 of 14 from the floor. Like, did some good things, especially on the offensive end, but missed 4 free throws. Obviously, one of them could have tied the game in the final minute and a half. Like, that was bad. Bad defense, lazy defense, poor shot selection at times. Like, just a frustrating way for Trey Johnson to end what, again, was a really good season, leading the SEC in scoring, leading all freshmen around the country in scoring. Again, not a horrible game. His best shooting performance since the Mississippi State game on the road a few weeks ago, but bad and lazy defense and the 4 missed free throws. When the game is as close as this one, every single point counts. Texas has a team miss 6 from the charity stripe. Trey Johnson, again, a near 90% shooter. Chose a bad time to miss 4 tonight. And I don't know about y'all, by the way. I'll hit some of the comments here in a moment, so keep them coming. Appreciate y'all tuning in. It hurt that Texas was only up by 8 at halftime. Now, if you asked me before the game, would I have signed up for an 8-point lead at recess? Of course I would have. I think we all would have. But Texas shot 58% in the first half. They shot 50% from deep in the first half. They were plus 10 on points in the paint. I mentioned they only had 4 turnovers. They were winning on the glass. Like, it felt like they had maybe the best offensive half they've had in 2025, like since they started playing actual teams in conference play, and they were still only up by 8. Like, it felt like they could have been up by 12, by 15, by 18. They just couldn't get enough stops. Xavier made their shots on offense, and that's where it was like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, I knew the game was over then. I mean, it's not true, but you would have loved for Texas to have been able to extend that lead to double digits instead of it just being an 8-point game. And by the way, you needed that Tremont Mark buzzer beater at the end of the first half to even make it 8, right? X cut it down to 6. They had the momentum. Tremont Mark hit that big shot late to push it to 8. But again, it felt like the Horns did so many things right in the first 20 minutes to only be up by 3 scores going into recess. That had to feel like a win for Xavier because Fremantle had a couple of fouls and he didn't play a whole lot in the first half. Cronwell had 3 fouls. He missed a lot of the first half. There was an opportunity there for Texas to really flex its muscle and extend that lead. And they just didn't do it. It wasn't because of offense. They scored 47 points in the first 20. They couldn't get the stops they needed to get defensively to really stretch this game out and make it impossible for Xavier to come back. An 8-point lead, that's surmountable. And if it was 18 at halftime, I don't know if that's surmountable. Just wish Texas was able to do a little bit more. Obviously, that's not where the game got away from them. They got outscored by 14 in the second half. That's where things completely fell apart. But again, it just, to me, it felt like the Horns had done enough to have more than an 8-point lead, and them not doing that ultimately ended up hurting them down the stretch.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. New customers can get $200 in bonus bets. When your first $5 bet wins, that's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. You've got to have those 5-12 upsets all ready. Those 4-13 upsets, maybe even a 3-14 in there just to get a little spice. Are we having fun yet? And with FanDuel, they make it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. The tournament games happen almost every day, so there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. Looking at the first four, there's a matchup of perennial tournament teams in the first four. The Xavier Musketeers face the Texas Longhorns. Winner will get Illinois next. FanDuel likes the Muskies by 3.5 in this one. Do people say that? Do they call them that? So they do now. Visit FanDuel.com and get on the college hoops action all tournament long.
The NCAA is absolutely praying that Ole Miss loses to North Carolina in the NCAA tournament Friday.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels.
Listen, the NCAA is absolutely begging for North Carolina to beat Ole Miss. They're praying for it. They need it. Their decision to include the North Carolina Tar Heels into the NCAA tournament put them in this position to where they need North Carolina, an 11 seed, a warranted 11 seed, with exactly one win against quad one opponents to make a run, and it starts with Ole Miss. And the reason you know that is some of the people, the sycophants, the people that just carry the water for the NCAA, people are starting to pile on. And Ole Miss now is a trendy first-round exit pick. And Ole Miss is now the fraud of the entire tournament, according to a CBS analyst. The NCAA needs, wants, whatever you want to say, however you want to prove it. It doesn't matter that North Carolina is a blue blood. They need a win to justify their inclusion into the dance. And with everybody now jumping on the Ole Miss fraud bandwagon and UNC not deserving to be in the tournament, you can see how this is all shaking up. Whenever they play in Milwaukee on Friday, it will be absolutely massive for Ole Miss basketball. But it's going to be more massive for the NCAA selection committee who chose to do this. They brought the potential litigation from the state of West Virginia into the fold with putting North Carolina into the tournament. They looked fantastic Tuesday night. But the NCAA is doing everything they can to ensure that North Carolina has the best possible situation to make a run, including playing in a playing game on Tuesday night and not playing in the NCAA tournament until Friday. That's not usually how they do it. It's a Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, Friday game. And for this year, for whatever reason, North Carolina even got an extra day of rest. So we'll see exactly how it goes. Anyway, we're going to go into Thunderdome for the first time this college basketball season. Isaac Shade from North Carolina. Isaac Shade from Locked On Tar Heels joins us. And Isaac, I just got to say this, the NCAA is begging that North Carolina wins this game against Ole Miss. After all of the controversy, West Virginia's governor threatening to sue and everything, they are praying they can win this game.
Dude, it's so funny, Willis, this whole thing. Also, West Virginia should probably go ahead and sue Bloomington, Indiana while they're at it for stealing their basketball coach now too. But yeah, I mean, good grief. This whole thing, I honestly, Willis, I had given up. I thought the Tar Heels, I didn't think they were going to get in, right? It was just like, I was preparing, I thought Monday's show for me was going to be a transfer portal show about offseason stuff. And here we are instead. I'm having to preview Carolina taking on San Diego State instead. And we're trying to figure out what this might look like. But it's one of those things that I'm with you where my thought was, don't let Carolina get in because they've won 8 out of 10. The only 2 losses are to the number 1 team in the nation and nearly beat them in the ACC semis. And so it's this weird thing where Carolina now is playing very good basketball, but comes up against an Ole Miss team that it's an interesting matchup, which I know we'll talk later.
Yeah, and if you look at this, in these play-in games, traditionally, the teams that play on Tuesday play on Thursday. The teams that play on Wednesday play on Friday. North Carolina, for whatever reason, got to play on Tuesday and is getting an extra day of rest, adding to the conspiracy, man.
Yes. And check this out. Like geographically, they played obviously in Dayton because that's where the playing games already are. As you all know, this game is going to be played in Milwaukee, which is just like a 6-hour drive from Dayton, or an hour or 2 flight. And so Carolina has that extra time. They've got a short trip. It's not like, a lot of times it's like we played in Dayton and you got to fly to Seattle or something crazy like that, right? And on top of all that, North Carolina, because of how easy they had things against San Diego State, nobody played 30 minutes or more, right? Every Tar Heel played under 30 minutes, and the starters came out with 7 minutes to go. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And they have the backing of essentially the whole country. If you are not an SEC fan, you are backing North Carolina in this game. I think the NCAA is probably backing Ole Miss in this game. Ole Miss is the rare 6-seed underdog in an NCAA tournament game. North Carolina's favorite in this game. Now, is this recency bias of what they did to San Diego State? Because San Diego State did not look ready to play in that game. They kind of got overwhelmed. But I think, is this recency bias?
I mean, there might be something to that for sure. And I mean, obviously, it's the FanDuel line opened at 1.5. So it's like, one made basket swings it one way or the other here with this thing. But yeah, I mean, there could very well be some recency bias to it. As Carolina, as we were just saying, comes in, having won 9 of 11, and Ole Miss, what is it, like 3-3 in the last 6? 3-4 in the last 7, if I'm remembering well. So yeah, there might be some how they perceive both teams to be playing lately.
Yeah, and remember with Ole Miss also, they did beat Tennessee this month.
Right. And the SEC versus the ACC is very different.
Yeah. It's really interesting because whenever I was looking at a correlation between the two schools and the two teams and everything, the Louisville game pops up. Ole Miss beat Louisville in their barn by 25 points earlier in the season. Ole Miss beat Alabama. That's pretty close to all of the crossover between the two teams. And I do not think these teams have ever played basketball before.
You know what? I hadn't even taken the time to look it up yet, Stephen, but I can do it as we're talking. But yeah, I off the top of my head, I can't remember a previous matchup between the two teams either. Yeah.
Listen, everybody knows that Ole Miss is a football school and basketball is a secondary thing. And this is the 10th time all time that Ole Miss basketball has made the NCAA tournament. So I was rooting for North Carolina hard Tuesday night. I wanted the jersey. I don't care how the game goes. I wanted to see the jersey matchup on the court. I just wish that Ole Miss would wear their throwbacks in that game. Their throwbacks would be fantastic, but I doubt that they will. As an Ole Miss fan and all of the Ole Miss fans, they're excited to play a game against North Carolina in the NCAA tournament because this is a signal of a rival. It doesn't matter that Carolina's an 11 seed and all of the controversy. It's the name on the jersey that Chris Beard, what he has done in Oxford, it is meaningful. And this is something that Ole Miss fans can latch on to that, hey, we are close to kind of getting to that corner.
Yeah. And look, Chris Beard, for those who are unaware, not only do I host Locked on Tar Heels, I also co-host Locked on College Basketball. And we routinely and regularly talk about Chris Beard as one of the very best basketball coaches in the land. And we're talking X's and O's, we're talking recruiting, all of it. Chris Beard can do it all. He's done it every stop he's been at. Texas Tech, Ole Miss now. It's phenomenal. If the Rebs can hang on to Chris Beard, I think there is you think about like what Bama has done, stepping up from being just known as football to like a dominant basketball program. There is a very real world, Stephen Willis, in which that could be the reality for Ole Miss going forward. And we've seen it with the recent trajectory of winning, 20 plus games these past couple seasons. Like that is a very real thing. And so I'm with you. I love the opportunity for both these teams to challenge each other in this way. And by the way, I got the record book pulled up while you were talking there. Miss Ole Miss and Carolina have played twice in the past, splitting those games. Stephen Willis, any guesses as to when those two previous games were played?
I'm going to say 1937 and 1948.
My man, you're not that far off, but you got to go even further back. 1923, February 28th, and then March 1st of 1926. The scores were Ole Miss 34, Carolina 32, and then Carolina 38, Ole Miss 23.
So this will be the first game in the history of Ole Miss versus Carolina to where one of the teams scores more than 40 points.
That's
because
exactly.
I'm willing to bet that both the teams are going to score more than 40 points.
In the first half, maybe, for crying out loud. And it's the first, that was literally a century ago. This is crazy.
Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, you will have multiple qualified candidates to choose from. And you can create cost-effective growth for your company. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps you find affordable, top-tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's Upwork.com, UPWORK.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies.
Jay, I have to ask you one question. Like when the brackets came out, what was the honest reaction? Was it like, oh man, we're playing UConn, or oh, okay, we're playing UConn? Like what was, I'm always curious when people see the team they're going to play, what the first reaction was.
First, thank you, Mark, for having me to do the crossover. Appreciate you being flexible with time and making this magic happen. To be honest, my first reaction when I saw it was, oh, we made the tournament. I mean, this is our first time being in a tournament in the Porter Moser era. So we're just sitting here like, hey, we're just glad that we got the invite. The other thing is that it's like, well, why this year compared to last year? Because last year we were 20-12. We didn't make the tournament. This year we're 20-13. We make the tournament. And I'm wondering if it's that SEC bias that everybody talks about, because I feel like it's definitely the love of the SEC, and ESPN just got to put as many teams in there as possible, or we just bring eyeballs. I don't know. But then when I saw it was UConn, I'm like, oh, great. We played defending champs. That's awesome. But this isn't the same powerhouse as it was last year. You can see there's a big refresh of players. Things haven't gone the way that UConn has done the last couple of years. So I was like, okay, we may have a puncher's chance, especially when I saw that spread drop.
Yeah, no, I think, what my initial reaction was, and I joked around with this with a buddy of mine the other day, is, oh man, maybe we can get some revenge for the Fiesta Bowl loss in 09.
Wait, ain't nothing wrong with that. That's actually a very good point. I didn't actually think about that part of it. I mean, this is a revenge game. You gotta go out there and you gotta go out there and let them know, hey, this ain't gonna happen all the time. We're gonna get our revenge.
No, and everyone's all jazzed up about UConn football, but this is not a football podcast because you guys own that sport and compared to us at the moment. So but also too, like I'm a stats nerd. I devour a bunch of this stuff because it's kind of how you form your opinions and or at least use it as a tool to decide whether you're going to bet on something, whether you're going to, pick your favorite team in a win. And when you look at these teams statistically, they're kind of identical. They have each team has weaknesses. Each team is very good offensively. Each team is porous defensively. Their net rankings are similar. The net for Oklahoma is 43. UConn is 32. The strength of schedule is heavy on Oklahoma because they played an SEC schedule and, a ton of quad one games in there. What's your overall sense of this game when you kind of break down some of these stats? I mean, 14th in offense for UConn, 21st in Ken Palm for Oklahoma. So they're kind of a carbon copy of each other.
Yeah, they are. It's very interesting to see that the committee actually got, I guess you could say, 8-9 right. Because you want some of these teams to be balanced when it comes to, especially when you get to the middle of the pack. You want them to be similar in a lot of capacities to make it for more of an interesting game. And that was the one thing I was actually impressed with that matchup. And as you mentioned these stats, I did some looking up on them myself because I kind of get into the weeds as well. But that was the thing that jumped out to me. I'm like, okay, you actually matched up teams that are similar, both not very good at rebounding, very solid offenses. Defenses are, depending on the day. So to me, it feels like it's going to be one of those bipolar games because, truth be told, we truly don't know which one of these teams are going to actually show up in this game. It's been this way most of the season. Oklahoma shows up and knocks off Michigan, Arizona, then they forget how to play basketball when they get into SEC conference play, which has actually been the name of the game for the Porter Moser teams. And then for UConn, you all, back-to-back titles, playing exceptional basketball. This year is just like, this isn't the same team we see. It's like the refresh hasn't come through for you all like it typically does as fast. So for us, I'm very intrigued to see which team actually learns how to box out and get rebounds and who actually plays really good defense. I think the team that plays the best defense is probably the one that's going to end up winning this game.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. And I think obviously we're going to get to the freshman matchup here after the break. But, I think if you break it down, actually, let me ask you a question. In terms of the way Porter Moser structured this team, obviously you have Jeremiah Fears, who's an incredible freshman. How did he structure this team? Like, are they mostly transfers or people that he brought in from either freshmen or redshirt sophomores, et cetera? I'm just curious because as far as the breakdown, you can look at a roster, but I can't necessarily. I guess you could tell, but I'm curious from your perspective, how he structured this team. Because it's playing its best basketball right now.
Yeah, and this team, his teams have a tendency of being really good in non-con and then forgetting how to play in conference play. And I think that's the thing that upset me the most about this season is this is our first year in the SEC. So technically this is kind of like non-con basketball every single game this entire year because we don't know these teams. They don't know us. We literally is our first year here and we still could not figure out how to keep the momentum from non-con. But to answer your question, the way it seems like with Porter's teams, they're mainly transfers. Every year, it's a massive refresh of players coming in and out, and then you get a couple of freshmen that you hope will hit. And luckily, Jeremiah Fears, and we'll talk about that after the break, finally, we hit on a really good one. And I was actually kind of surprised that we was able to land him, and he's actually exceeded all of my expectations. But most of the team is really built a lot out of transfers. That's kind of one of the big complaints that I've heard from fans about Porter is that it doesn't feel like he can retain guys. It's like he get them in for a year and then sometimes two, and guys is like, yeah, I'm kind of tired of this and I'm going to get out of here. And so we're hoping that we can see some retention besides your one and dones. Unfortunately, in college basketball, you kind of have to have some one and dones in order to be successful, especially deep into the tournament. And so you're going to get a few of those, but your goal is the guys that are going to remain in college. You want to get your team to where it's more of a veteran type team because those are the ones that typically make a longer drive into the tournament, especially when you're not a traditional power in basketball.
Yeah, it's totally fair. Your fans should probably give him a little bit of a break because every team deals with the refresh every year now. It's almost like if you listen, Dan Hurley was on 60 Minutes saying that 50% of his team has got one foot out the door too. So it's not true. It's not anywhere. It's not just in places that aren't traditional powers. It's everywhere. And you embrace it or you don't. And that's the way college sports is now. I'm sure the football team has plenty of refresh and every year. So I'd imagine basketball needs to adopt that as well. All right.
I totally agree with you there.